referred to syncretism that we have combined in the American church. Being Canadian, coming in, seeing it a little bit of an outsider's eyes, what are some of the idolatries that you see that are at work in the American church?
If I go to the deepest level, the Canadian church is bound up in many of the same idolatries because we're part of a bigger Western civilization complex with the same idolatrous roots. On the other hand, it takes a different form. And in many ways, you can look at the different forms the way Europe, it's an older Western culture, the United States, that was a culture formed during the Enlightenment, and then post-Enlightenment cultures like Canada, New Zealand, Australia, that have a different shape yet. But all of them have the same kind of idolatries, but have expressed them differently. So what idols then would I see in the United States, and many of them in Canada as well, but in the United States? Well, I think one of the major ones is freedom. The whole notion of liberalism in its old 19th century sense of the free, autonomous individual that undergirds the whole shaping of American culture. I am free to be and do whatever I want. And that expresses itself in the right wing and in the left wing. It's just a matter of what you're free to do and be whatever you want. And so I think freedom, which I think that's misusing a biblical word. It's not freedom. A much better word is autonomy. Autonomy, I am a law unto myself. I don't have to live under God's law. I'm a law to myself. My freedom is about the individual. I was struck between the difference between Canada and the US in the whole area of COVID. When COVID hit in the US and Canada, I was in both countries. Canada, there was still some sense of British common law of the common good. And Canadians kind of said, well, of course you do these things to take care of one another. This is part of what it means to live as community. Whereas there's this sense of individual autonomy. You can't tell me to wear a mask. You can't tell me to get these vaccines. You can't tell me to social distance. Now, whether there are good reasons or not behind those, what underlay it is the sense of autonomy. I can be what I want as an individual, and no one's going to tell me what to do. So there's no sense of the common good. And so I think that freedom. I think secondly, one of the biggest idols is consumerism. We've lived for centuries now by making the economy central to our culture, a growing economy. And we've moved from a sort of a producing industrial society into one where the goods are now being consumed. Consumption has become more than a consumption of goods. It's become a consumption of experiences. And I think that we're now consuming everything from marriages to missions trips to worship. And so consumption, I think a consumerist worldview that begins to engulf everything in consumption is a huge idol in the West. I think political ideologies are enormous. I think the ideologies of the right and the left are idolatrous. They're focusing and taking one aspect of public life, whatever that might be, and they're building whole stories and whole political visions around that without being able to listen to the other person. And so I think you've got the different political ideologies, right, that are ripping apart American culture. Both of them are deeply idolatrous. I think this would be part of the freedom, but I think we have made idols out of sexuality. This is what's led, I think, to a lot of the gender issues and the sexuality issues. I can make my body and I can do with my sexuality what I want. And I think all that has come from the sexual revolution of the past and making sex very much of an idol, not keeping in its place. So I think in postmodernity, there's a number of idols at work there. They rightly recognize that reason and technology are not going to build a better world. And I think it's led to a number of idolatrous movements that are showing themselves both in the woke movement and the Trumpist movement. And I suppose if I could just think of one more, I mean, I could go on for a while, but technicism. I think technology is an enormous, okay. and I think technology is ruining our lives in all kinds of ways. And if it's not ruining it, at least we can say it's emptying it. And I think we desperately need to ask how our cell phones and computers and social media, the way it's affecting us so deeply. We put our trust in technology a couple hundred years ago or 150 years ago to start building a better culture. And the way idolatry works is you put your trust in me, great. I'll give you some benefits and I'll own you very quickly. And technology has done just that. It's given us tremendous benefits, but it's increasingly owning us as well. So I'd say technology is one of those idols as well.